Every year, a small number of Amish boys walk away from the only life they've ever known and never come back. No goodbye letter, no warning, just an empty bed one morning and a family left to wonder what they did wrong. Life on the farm. For an Amish boy, the day begins before the sun does. Chores come first, feeding the horses, milking cows, mucking stalls, all before breakfast is on the table. By the time most children in the outside world are still asleep, he's already been working for an hour. School ends at 8th grade, and after that, farm work becomes his full-time life. Sunup to sundown, 6 days a week, with only Sunday set aside for church and rest. There are no sick days built into this rhythm, no summer vacation. The farm doesn't wait, and neither does his father's expectations. The comparison. Across the road, there's often an English neighbor, and he's impossible not to notice. He drives a tractor while the Amish boy walks behind a team of horses. He finishes his fields in an afternoon. It takes the Amish family all day with hand tools and animal power. The boy starts to ask questions he was never supposed to ask out loud. Why can his neighbor do this the easy way, while his own family is bound by rules that seem to exist just to make everything harder? At first, these are just idle thoughts, dismissed as easily as they arrive. But over the years, watching that same tractor cross that same field, the questions don't go away. They just get louder and harder to push back down. The price of land. Even if he wanted to stay and build a life exactly like his father's, the math doesn't work anymore. Farmland that once cost a few $1,000s an acre in places like Lancaster County now sells for $20,000 an acre or more. A young man starting from nothing simply cannot buy enough land to support a family through farming alone. The income the land produces isn't close to what the land costs. Older generations bought in when prices were low and passed land down within families lucky enough to hold on to it. For everyone else, farming is no longer a real option. Some communities have responded by moving to cheaper land in other states, but that means leaving behind parents, grandparents, and everything familiar. For a boy already unsure if he wants this life at all, watching the door to farming quietly close makes the decision to leave entirely feel less like rebellion and more like the only door still open. The quiet questions. It isn't just about tractors or land prices. It's about a life where nearly every major decision has already been made before he was born. What he'll wear, who he can marry, what machines he's allowed to touch, which prayers he'll say, and in what language. The Ordnung, the unwritten set of community rules, governs details most outsiders would never think to regulate. Breaking small rules can mean quiet correction from parents or the bishop. Breaking bigger ones after baptism can mean formal discipline. He begins to wonder what he actually believes, separate from what he's always been told to believe. Is his faith his own, or is it simply the water he swum in his entire life, never questioned because he was never shown another option? These questions rarely get spoken aloud. In most Amish households, doubt is not something you announce at the dinner table. The turning point. For some boys, there's no single dramatic moment, just years of quiet accumulation that finally tips over. But for many, there is one specific night or one specific conversation that changes everything. Maybe it's a harsh word from a father who doesn't understand why farm work isn't enough for his son. Maybe it's a friend who left months earlier now visiting in jeans and a car, looking lighter than he's ever looked in Amish clothes. Maybe it's simply waking up one more time before dawn, staring at the ceiling, and realizing he cannot do this for another 40 years. Whatever the trigger, it turns a vague, uncomfortable feeling into an actual decision. Once that line is crossed in his mind, everything that follows is just logistics, figuring out how and when and whether he tells anyone at all. Planning in secret. Leaving isn't as simple as walking out the front door. Most Amish boys have no birth certificate readily available, no driver's license, often no photo ID of any kind, and very little cash of their own. So the planning starts small and stays hidden, setting aside money earned from odd jobs, quietly asking a former Amish contact in town about apartments or work, sometimes reaching out to an English friend who agrees to help without asking too many questions. Timing matters. Leaving during a slow season draws less attention than vanishing in the middle of harvest. Some boys tell one sibling, sworn to secrecy. Others tell absolutely no one, afraid that even one shared word might reach a parent and end the plan before it starts. The stress of maintaining a normal face at the dinner table while quietly preparing to disappear from it weighs on him more than any physical labor ever has. The night he leaves, when the night finally comes, it often looks almost anticlimactic from the outside. A bag packed days earlier and hidden in the barn. A window chosen instead of a door because it doesn't creak. A walk down a dark road toward a car that isn't supposed to be there, driven by someone who agreed to help. There's no dramatic slamming of doors, no final speech. Just the quiet, careful exit of someone who knows that if he's caught even minutes before he's gone, everything could fall apart. Once the car pulls away and the farmhouse disappears behind him, something shifts. He's no longer the boy who does chores before sunrise. He's someone else now, someone he hasn't met yet, and there's no clear way back to who he was an hour ago. First days outside. The first days in the outside world expose just how unprepared 8th grade schooling and farm labor leave him for modern life. He has no driver's license, so even simple errands require someone else's help. He has no photo ID, which makes renting an apartment or opening a bank account far harder than it should be. His education stopped at basic arithmetic and reading enough to run a farm, not enough for most modern jobs. Everyday objects strangers take for granted, automatic doors, self-checkout machines, smartphones, can feel disorienting rather than exciting. Some former Amish describe this period as exhilarating. Others describe it as one of the loneliest stretches of their lives, surrounded by unfamiliar people in an unfamiliar world, with no family to call if things go wrong. Sleep doesn't come easy either. For 18 years, nights ended in the same farmhouse, under the same roof, with the same sounds of animals settling outside the window. Now he might be on a stranger's couch, or in a rented room paid for with cash he counted twice before handing over. Simple tasks turn into small ordeals, filling out a job application that asks for an email address he doesn't have, or standing frozen in a grocery store aisle trying to figure out a card reader everyone else swipes without thinking. Clothes are another quiet battle. Buying his first pair of jeans can feel less like freedom and more like standing in front of a mirror trying to recognize the person staring back. Every ordinary errand becomes a small test of whether he can actually survive out here alone. The family's response. Back home, the reaction depends heavily on whether he had already been baptized into the church. If he left before baptism, the consequences, while painful, are often less severe. Many communities treat this as a young person still deciding, rather than someone breaking a formal vow. If he left after baptism, the response can include the ban in my dung, formal excommunication, and social shunning. Family members may still love him privately, but publicly they may not eat at the same table with him, do business with him, or accept help from him, depending on how strictly their community interprets the practice. Some families quietly stay in contact despite the rules. Others follow the shunning completely, believing it's the only way to bring him back. Either way, the boy who leaves often carries the weight of knowing his absence isn't just missed in some homes, it's treated as something closer to grief. Word travels fast in a small community, and by the following Sunday, most of the church already knows his seat is empty. Some neighbors will avoid the subject entirely when his parents are near. Others may quietly ask if there's been any word from him, careful not to sound too curious. For younger siblings still living at home, his absence becomes something they're not supposed to talk about, even though they think about him constantly. A letter home, if one is ever sent, might go unanswered for weeks, not out of cruelty, but because his parents genuinely don't know how to respond to a son who chose a world they were taught their whole lives to fear. In some cases, it's not until years later, sometimes only after a parent has passed away, that any real conversation happens again. Building a new life. Rebuilding takes years, not months. Many former Amish start by working construction or manual labor jobs since that's the skill set they already have, while slowly saving for a GED or additional schooling. Some enroll in community college in their 20s, sitting in classrooms next to teenagers half their age. Others find mentors, often other former Amish, who help them navigate paperwork, banking, and basic technology most people learn as children. Slowly, a version of independence starts to take shape. A driver's license, a bank account, maybe eventually a career unrelated to anything he was raised to do. It rarely happens quickly, and it's almost never painless, but for many, it eventually becomes a life they wouldn't trade back, even with everything it costs to get there. Money remains one of the hardest early hurdles. Without credit history, a social security card that's ever been used, or references from a past employer, even basic financial steps take far longer than they would for someone raised outside the community. Some former Amish lean on small networks that have formed specifically to help others in the same position. Informal groups who share leads on landlords willing to rent without a credit check, or employers who don't mind hiring someone with no formal work history beyond a family farm. Over time, the gaps close. A few go on to start their own businesses, often in construction or woodworking, trades they already knew from home. Others quietly settle into ordinary jobs and ordinary lives, blending in so completely that coworkers never guess where they came from, facing the ones who stayed. Every so often, life brings him back into the same room as the boys he grew up with, a chance meeting at a farmer's market, a cousin's funeral, a market town they both still visit. The men who stayed are often broader in the shoulders, weathered by the sun, speaking the same Pennsylvania Dutch he grew up with, but now has to consciously remember. There's rarely open hostility in these encounters, more often a careful, formal politeness. Two people who share a childhood but no longer share a world. He might notice the calluses on their hands and feel a flicker of something between guilt and relief. They might notice his phone, his car